friction maxing, coherence, and the unconscious return to reality. How to listen to this video, and why it exists. Before we go any further, it's important to be clear about what this video is, and what it is not. This is not a trend explainer in the usual sense. It's not a productivity talk, a self-help prescription, or a motivational argument for doing hard things. This video exists because something unusual is happening at a collective level. A phrase has entered public discourse, friction maxing, and people are talking about it intensely, but explaining it poorly. Psychologists, therapists, wellness writers, and cultural commentators are all circling the same behavior pattern, each from their own angle. Their explanations make partial sense, yet none of them fully account for why this is happening now, why it feels instinctive rather than chosen, or why it cuts across so many domains of life at once. So this video takes a different approach. Rather than starting with advice, we start with orientation. Rather than telling you what to do, we focus on what is being corrected. Rather than interpreting behavior as ideology or morality, we look at it as a regulatory signal. In other words, a sign that something is trying to rebalance itself. Here's how the exploration is structured. First, we'll look at how friction maxing is being talked about publicly, and why those explanations feel both convincing and incomplete. Then we'll introduce the missing organizing principle, coherence, and explain how its breakdown quietly destabilizes motivation, meaning, and trust. From there, we'll explore relational coherence, how the relationship between action, consequence, effort, and timing has been disrupted, and why friction restores that relationship. We'll examine why psychological frameworks tend to miss this layer, not because they're wrong, but because they operate at a different altitude. Finally, we'll zoom out to the timing context, including planetary and cultural pressures, to understand why this correction is surfacing now, rather than earlier or later. You don't need to agree with every frame used here. You don't need to believe in astrology. You don't need to adopt friction as a lifestyle. All that's required is curiosity about one simple question. What happens when human systems lose coherence? And how do they try to restore it when language, meaning, and motivation stop working? That question is the through line. Everything that follows is an attempt to answer it, from the inside out and the outside in. The public story, how friction maxing is being explained. Most public commentary explains friction maxing in familiar psychological language. You'll hear things like, people are craving meaning again. This builds resilience. We've become too comfortable. Discomfort strengthens character. We need to relearn distress tolerance. These explanations are not wrong. They simply operate at the wrong altitude. They describe what friction produces, not why friction is being sought in the first place. It's the difference between describing the warmth of a fire and understanding why people gathered around it when the temperature dropped. Psychologists, therapists, and cultural commentators are trained to interpret behavior through conscious motivation, values, beliefs, meaning-making, personal development. So they naturally frame friction maxing as an intentional strategy. But this phenomenon did not begin as a strategy. It began as a reflex. The missing variable, coherence. To understand what's actually happening, we need a different organizing concept. That concept is coherence. Coherence is not motivation. It is not meaning. It is not effort or discipline. Coherence is the felt reliability of a system. The sense that actions connect to outcomes in predictable, trustworthy ways. When coherence is present, you trust your timing, your nervous system stays regulated, effort feels proportional, feedback makes sense. When coherence degrades, motivation collapses, anxiety becomes diffuse, control increases, meaning-seeking intensifies, the system doesn't panic, it destabilizes quietly. And modern life has been degrading coherence for years. How coherence quietly broke. 3 things were removed almost simultaneously. Delay. Everything became instant. Resistance. Effort was outsourced, consequence visibility, cause and effect blurred. Imagine learning to ride a bike on ice, where every movement slips and no correction sticks. Eventually, you stop trusting your balance. That's what frictionless systems do to the nervous system. They work, but they don't regulate. And when regulation drops below a threshold, the unconscious looks for any mechanism that restores feedback integrity. That mechanism is friction. Relational coherence, the relationship that broke. The breakdown isn't just internal, it's relational. Relational coherence refers to the reliability of the relationship between self and environment, action and consequence, effort and outcome, choice and timing. When that relationship weakens, people don't lose intelligence. They lose trust. Friction restores relationship. Not symbolically, physically. You feel effort meet resistance. You feel time pass. You feel consequence arrive. That felt loop repairs relational coherence. Why psychology misses this, and why that's understandable. Psychological commentary tends to interpret friction as a tool for growth, but coherence restoration does not aim at growth. It aims at stability. The unconscious is not trying to improve the self. It is trying to restore reliable signal flow. That's why people can't fully explain why friction helps. They just say, "It feels grounding. I feel more real." I don't know why this works, but it does. Because regulation is returning below language, the planetary overlay. Why this is happening now? Astrology enters here not as belief, but as a timing language. Certain planetary pressures correspond to saturation points, moments when systems can no longer avoid correction. Saturn. Reality reasserts itself. Saturn governs limits, consequences, and time. When Saturn pressure increases, shortcuts stop working. Frictionless systems lose credibility. Reality demands to be met again. Mars. Effort. Returns to the body. Mars governs action and embodied agency. As automation expanded, Mars was bypassed. Now, effort seeks expression through the body. Walking, lifting, doing things manually, completing cycles. Pluto. False efficiency collapses. Pluto exposes systems that function at the cost of vitality. When friction is suppressed too long, power drains out of individuals. Friction reclaims agency. Uranus. Speed outpaced integration. Uranus accelerates technology faster than biology can adapt. Friction slows the system without rejecting innovation. Neptune. Meaning dissolves. Abstract. Meaning collapsed. Felt reality becomes the new anchor. Mercury. Thinking needs. Constraint. Overchoice fragments. Cognition. Friction simplifies thought by restoring sequence. Together, these forces create a single pressure. Return to contact. Why this is being misnamed? Friction maxing is a poor name for a precise correction. The unconscious is not maximizing friction. It's restoring minimum viable friction. Enough resistance for feedback. Enough delay for trust. Enough effort for agency. When this overshoots, it becomes performative hardship. That burns people out. The correction we're discussing is quieter and far more effective. The irony of commentary. Many explanations of friction maxing accidentally recreate incoherence by moralizing it. They turn a regulatory reflex into an obligation. But regulation doesn't respond to obligation. It responds to contact. What this moment is asking for, not discipline, not toughness, not rejection of convenience, but discernment. Where friction restores relationship, welcome it. Where friction is performative, ignore it. This is not about becoming better. It's about becoming coherent again. The quiet correction. This trend is not a movement. It's a correction pulse, a signal that abstraction ran ahead of integration. Friction is simply how the system finds its way back. Not heroically, not dramatically, but reliably. And once coherence returns, friction stops being the focus at all. It fades into the background, exactly where it belongs.